very few people, probably no one in fact, is trying to use energy. Similarly, very few people are trying to damage the environment or use more resources or to pollute. They're trying to do other things. They're trying to make the house warm or make dinner for their family or make sure dinner's on the table when kids come home from school. They're trying to get places. They're trying to do other things. And I think we need to remember that. We need to remember that framing all of this as being about energy or carbon or any of these quite abstract concepts and giving people feedback on that, on those concepts, which is often what work around kind of behaviour change has involved, misses something about the nuanced details of everyday life. What are people actually trying to do? Why are they trying to do it? In what context are they doing it? For whom are they doing it? With whom are they doing it? So I almost feel that working on energy use is the term energy use is not necessarily helpful in talking to people.
One point our research has reinforced is that people don't go out to consume energy as such, but that energy use is part of other everyday activities around the home. So practice scholars, for example, might look at individual social practices like cooking, laundry, cleaning, and so on, and look at opportunities for change within those. In our own research, we found that not everything we do at home is meaningfully approached as a bounded practice. So we might look at some routines like going to bed at night, getting up in the morning, leaving home, returning home, looking at those sequence of activities as opportunities of for change. And then also, if you do look at social practices as units of analysis, they actually are very interconnected in everyday life, and so there's a lot to be gained from looking at their interrelations. Beyond this, how people use energy is often part of very mundane and very private activities, and they aren't necessarily talked or thought about. So researching energy use in the home really requires innovative methodologies that get to the problem of energy consumption in imaginative and sometimes indirect ways.
The framing of this research was because of the urgency and the severity of the climate change challenge that we perceived. The fact that households are both part of the problem and also part of the potential solution. So households are very important conduit for greenhouse gas emissions through both the goods and services that they use, so both the kind of embedded energy in the household and the things that flow through the household as part of everyday life. In the context where governments are being very slow to act on climate change, households are also having to adapt independently, if you like, and so we were also interested in their adaptive capacity. So really we think of the household as a black box that hadn't been studied, but in a number of different parts of our work we've been kind of digging into that black box in ethnographic terms.
A lot of energy use is not just down to individual behavioural choices, if you like. These things are actually very social. In many cases, it's based around social practices and routines that become established over time. It's not as simple as just telling people do something differently, and then somehow people's behaviour will magically change. In many cases, those decisions about how to use things are based on and what to do are based on much wider social practices, which potentially take longer to change. And I feel there's also, as part of that, there's a dimension around people's understanding, and I particularly given things like energy are quite abstract concepts. And even climate change. I mean, climate change is an extremely abstract concept for most people to grasp. It's very large. It is it takes a long time potentially for effects to be felt. It's something that's a long way away from the scale of individual people. So I think that people's understanding and understanding people's understanding and how their understanding of how their actions relate to what's actually going on in the world or wider impacts is really important. But it's something that it brings a degree of, I suppose, kind of cognitive psychology into and decision science into into a sort of design ethnography approach to energy. And I don't mean it in the sense of trying to get to the right model. I'm not interested particularly in what is the exact mental representation that people might have of the concept of energy. It's more around understanding how people's understandings of it, people's imaginaries of the concept, affect the way that they use things. And it may be that they don't affect it in some cases. It may be that, as we've said, people are not trying to use energy, they're trying to do something quite different.
I think one of the key problems in research on energy consumption, and actually in public debate, is that we very often still deal with simplistic notions of people, their behaviour and opportunities for change. So approaches might be quite individualistic, centering on people's psychology, their attitudes and motivations and so on. And maybe paying less attention to the social, embedded and sensory embodied dimensions of energy use. And I think that's partly because we're all people and we all use energy, so we feel we're experts on what people do. But I think there's a real need to look at social science research and specifically ethnography to provide systematic research and insights into the complexities of energy consumption.
I think one of the key issues, one of the key problems, if you like, that I've seen in the time I've been working on this the last few years on this kind of subject is really the kind of lack of attention or the lack of taking seriously social science by policymakers, particularly those involved in energy use on a large scale. And I think and even perhaps more extreme than that is the fact design as an academic subject is not really hasn't really been taken seriously by social scientists either, which often puts us in a position of trying to explain what we do and why it's valuable in a way that often pushing things uphill in a sense. I mean, the way we have addressed that, the way I have addressed that in the past, is simply by asking, by trying to reframe the questions as being not just entirely quantitative, not just entirely, how much energy is used, what is it used on, but perhaps more around, well, why? Why do some people do it like this and other people do it like that? And those are often things that can't be answered directly through quantitative measurement. There's something that requires more qualitative evaluation. And it's something where social scientists, ethnographers and indeed designers are very well placed to explore those questions. And actually the answers are of interest to policymakers, right? They're of interest to people working in energy research because, they're trying to make things better. So I think we need to address that. I think we can emphasize the ability to investigate those why questions, which go alongside the kind of how much or how many.
One of the issues that we've encountered again and again in the literature and also in policy circles is that if we just tell people how much energy they use and where they waste energy, however that is defined or by whom, then they have the ability to change. It might be true for some people in some situations, but generally speaking, instances of bad energy use aren't easily isolated or rectified. They're actually embedded in wider social processes, experiences and meanings. And in terms of future challenges and opportunities, I think there are 2 points. One is to do with how we imagine, conceptualize the home of the future. And the other regards how we might build bridges between the world today and what lies ahead, specifically how we might imagine future systematically based on an understanding of everyday life today. So in terms of the home of the future, I think it's important to view today's homes as already always dynamic and changing. We can think of them, for example, as changing environments in which people, technologies and resources like gas, electricity and water come together in ever-changing entanglements and constellations. And that's a terminology we borrow from Tim Ingold, for example. And it's this continual change and the aspect of contingencies that we should account for and design for. We specifically address the home as a key site for research and change in our recent book, Making Homes, Ethnography and Design. And we include insights from the LEADER project in this book, as well as from other studies on the home and sustainability. In terms of transporting these homes into the future, I think there's a real need for a systematic way of looking at moments of consistency and change in today's homes, and perhaps also homes of the past, and to identify relevant sequences of activity that we might be able to imagine in the future, to see how future infrastructures, structural material contexts, people, social relations and so on might come together in different ways to enable what we might consider a better energy future.